Okay, so good afternoon. Today's lesson is all about variables. We've talked about this and we've used it, but we're going to formally go through everything that is involved with variables today. By the end of today's lesson, we want to be crystal clear in our minds what the difference is between an integer, a whole number, a real, which is like a number that's not an integer, and a char and a string. So I'll leave that for us to look at later, but some of you know that already. We need to be able to give an exam definition of what a variable is and what we use it for. We need to be able to use them in our code, and we want to be able to keep track of them in an IDE, whether that's create with code or Thonny or Moo or anything like that. So this is our definition. I'll let you look at it for about 30 seconds, then I'll see if you can repeat it in your own words for a class charts positive. So the two key points here is a variable stores something, and it stores something that can change when the program runs, but the variable has a name. For example, age, and age is set to 14, or age is set to 13, or whatever. So we've got different types of data. We've talked a lot about integers at the moment. A real is a value that is not an integer, but is still a number. We've got booleans and we've got characters. There's one that was missing from our list at the start of the lesson that has not got an example here. What was it? So we want to make sure that variables have meaningful names. They don't have to in Python. You can call them A, B, and C like mathematicians seem to like to, but in computer science, we use meaningful names, as in the name should describe the value that it stores. Python doesn't care, but we choose the name carefully to try and make your code as easy to read as possible, and you get marks for it in your paper 2 exam if your variables have sensible names. We talked about camel case before. What is camel case? Right, so these are the primitive data types. Strings are not primitive data types. Because they represent multiple characters. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. So we're only interested in primitive data types today. If you use the wrong data type, then we have errors and we need to be able to deal with that. And we need to know in both create with code, but more importantly, Thonny, how we can see the value that's stored in each variable. So you should have from the VLE, half term 1, algorithms and programming, here we go, CT3 today, and it should look like this. For now, open up Thonny and try out each of these keyboard shortcuts. See if you can work out what they do in Thonny for me, please. All right, so we put in some keyboard shortcuts here that are exceptionally useful when you're coding. Why are they so useful, and why is this one at the bottom that we've added in so useful? So I press tab to add this extra one in. I'm just going to use Control S to save it, and I'm going to call it question 1. So I'm going to call it q01.py for Python. You will get given 6 Python files in your exam. Q1, Q2, Q3, or they might even say Q1 student, Q2 student, something like that. You will get a printed piece of paper with 6 questions on, and it will say at the end of each question, make sure you've saved your file as Q01 finished in your finished folder. But what tends to happen is you see the code and it will have, I don't know, the first questions are dead easy, and it will have things like age equals 3, and then it will have some questions down at the bottom like write the name of a variable. And then you've got to type it in here. So it might be something like that, and then you have to write it in. So what students always do is that they just write it straight away, the answer. But as soon as you run your code, that has saved over the original file, which is normally fine. However, if you want to go back and restart the whole question, well, you can't, because you've overwritten the original file. So what you should always do at the start of your exam is Control Shift and S and save it in the folder that you're given as what it tells you on the exam paper, Q01 finished. And then if you ever want to restart the question, at least you've got a copy of it before. So that Control Shift S is exceptionally helpful. When you've changed your file, there's a little asterisk here that means it's not saved. Look, I press Control S and it's gone away. As soon as you change it, that asterisk comes back. It is your responsibility to save your file in the right place with the right name, otherwise it won't get marked and you won't get marks for it in the exam. Okay, activity 2 then, you have to start with these and fill them in. So instead of the underscores, dog age in months, I guess this is going to be an integer, a whole number, and you're going to need to fill in all the gaps in here. Okay. It says copy the code into your IDE. Class charts positive question, if you can remember what IDE stands for. So integrated development environment, we're recommending Thonny. It's free to use at home. Integrated means everything's in one place, because everything you need to run code is all in one window, all in one place. Development, because you're writing code. And environment, because it's the program that you're going to do your development in. Okay, fill in the gaps, make it work, and think about which data types you're using. Okay, so I've made some deliberate mistakes on here. I'm going to press F5 to run. And this assistant sometimes is really useful, but sometimes is irritating because it kind of gets in the way. So F5 to run, and I see the error. The actual error is down here, and it tries to give some hints on here. So what is wrong with my code, and how can I fix it? Yeah, so we've got an indentation error, which means that we've got that extra space which breaks things. Python is really particular about indentation. Things should always be lined up unless there's a reason for it not to be lined up. So that fixes some of it. This will now run until it gets to line 4 by the looks of it. What's wrong with this? So true is only recognized as a Boolean value if it's got a capital letter. So we could have true or false, but we need to have capital letters. Even before I run it, can you spot the problem and how to fix it next? So at the moment, if we try and run this, it will get to line 6 and it says it doesn't know what f is. It's thinking that f is a variable and it hasn't found f. We could say f equals 1 and then run it, and then Python would have no problem with it. But what we want is to store gender as female, which we could write. But I think the questions want us to not do strings today and just deal with characters. So we're just going to have a single character on here. And I'm sorry if you feel limited by one character to define your gender identity, but we'll have to deal with that for today. Why is nothing appearing on my screen? Why is it not saying what the bill paid was? Yeah, we haven't got a print statement at the moment. Notice the colours all change. If you go from prin to print, this is called syntax highlighting. Syntax means according to what things are, like a string or a Boolean or an integer or a real or a keyword built into Python, the colours change. So what does it want? Bill paid plus gender. Has anyone got as far as running this yet? Predict. Chat to the person next to you. What will happen? Will it succeed? Will it fail? If it fails, what will happen? If it succeeds, what will the output be? So the problem here is that bill paid is a Boolean value named after George Boole, who was a really clever mathematician who made a whole new version of maths just with 2 values, true and false. And scientists owe an awful lot of logic to George Boole. So we call all these values Boolean values in his honor. Gender is, well, the exam board would say it's a character, but Python would call it a string. It's 0 or more characters. This plus operator tries to concatenate, and concatenation means joining together. And if we try and concatenate, it says unsupported operand. We can't concatenate a bool and a str, but we can concatenate a str and a str, a string and a string. How? By converting this into a string. So there we go, we've got truth. What is truth? It is true with f concatenated onto the end. Next thing I'd like you to try out, so you can try this yourself. I'm going to take out the str and bill paid and prove that it's not a syntax error. If I put a run and debug nicer on here, notice that it doesn't run the whole program. It just runs the first part of the first line. And I'm going to press step over. F6 is the keyboard shortcut. and it's running one line at a time. So the code is running. There's no syntax errors. If there was a syntax error, it would not run at all. And at this point, we can go View and Variables. And notice we can see the value stored in each variable. That's really helpful. Okay, class charts positive question. What's the keyboard shortcut to run one line? So if I press F6 again, we should see car height in meters appear in here, and it's just been set to 1.7. Here we go. And I'll do it again. And at this point, it's almost about to crash. But I'm going to say step into this time, F7. And I really like this about Thonny. You can't do this in Create with Code or Moo. It will try and do the whole line. It can't do the whole line until it's worked out the expression inside brackets. F7 again. It can't work out the expression in brackets until it knows what bill paid is. And it doesn't know what, oh, it does know what bill paid is because it's true. Then it needs to know what gender is. I'm keeping pressing F7 each time. What is gender? Well, gender is F. Then it tries to concatenate the two together, and this is where it fails. This is really powerful. That allows you to step through each logical sequence to work out exactly where the error is happening. I'd like you to try that yourself, please. Type it all out, and it's run and debug nicer, and a combination of F6 and F7 until you're happy understanding how this works. So activity 3, this is almost exactly like the type of question you would have in a question 1, or maybe even a question 2 of your year 11 Python exams. Really impressive you got to this stage to understand it already. Create an integer. So what I'm going to do, Control C, I'm just going to copy and paste that whole comment in here. Obviously it doesn't know how to do that, but I'm going to make it into a comment. So how do we do that? Well, I'm not going to do all of them for you, but I'll do this first one. Create an integer variable called char counter. So char counter is the name of a variable. Assignment, you'll know from your competewithcode.uk, your K-Pride challenge, assignment is just where you set the value of a variable. Which value are we going to assign? Well, it tells you. So we're trying to use the right terminology. That's why we do those K keywords, K-Pride challenges, so that when you sit in an exam, you know what integer means, you know what variable means, you know what assignment means, you know what a value is, and you know how to translate that into the actual code. I would always recommend leaving a blank line in between your comments so that it's crystal clear that the comment refers to the line underneath. And then your job is to create a variable called track length and assign it to the value 34.12. There's no tricks in here. The exam is not there to catch you out. If you understand the language, the actual code is dead easy in these first couple of questions. Okay, so this is your extension. I want you to create, using as many variables as is appropriate, a homework excuse generator. The idea is that you should ask the user, that's you or me, I can type and talk and think at the same time, their name. Ask the subject the homework is for. Ask the teacher name. I would like it to generate a random excuse. So how do we do that? Well, first I'd better show you randomness. So let's import random, and it knows how to do random things. So you can do print random.randint. You can have random numbers between, you need a minimum and a maximum. So 1 and 5 should give you a random number. Don't really want that. I want a random choice between different strings. So my dog ate it, and it was abducted by aliens. None of these excuses will work for me if you don't do your homework. Class charts was down. You've no idea how many times I hear that. So this time, random.choice should have one argument, and I've given it lots. So this, we'll talk about this formally next lesson. I want a list of values to choose from. What would a sensible identifier, a sensible name be for that list of things? Yeah, so excuses. And then we have all of these things, and if we want to store all of them into one variable, we'll plop them in a list. We'll just surround them with square brackets. Then I need to say what I'm choosing from. Inside the brackets, I need the name of the variable, so excuses. And now I can choose a random excuse. So your job, I'm not going to do all of it, but it'll be something like input what is your name, and it will ask you what your name is and then show the excuse. Well, sequence is important here. Ask the question first before showing the excuse. If you ask a question, it's rude not to listen to the answer. This will return the answer, so let's store it. Name equals, what is this? It's a variable. What is a variable? It's the name of something, a value that we can store that might change when the program runs. So you could do something like print dear, and then you'll have to put the teacher name in there. From name. So what's your name, Mr. String? Just predict what's going to happen when this runs. Yeah, we spotted that it says literally NAME because that's in quotation marks, and that's what quotation marks means. Literally, exactly this. We want to show the value of the variable. We've got to concatenate the variable itself, joined, concatenated with that text. Let's see. That's the type of thing that I'd like you to do. You can put as creative an excuse as you'd like in your list. You need to ask for the subject homework. You might want to ask what the homework itself was. You want to ask for the teacher's name and generate a random excuse. That's your extension. I will save this code and I'll share a link to it. I'll put it on my screen. I'll maybe send it out to your screens if I can work out how to do that. Let's see. Yeah, that's the link that you're going to need. When you finish this, so we've got 9 minutes left in the lesson, we're going to make sure that this is all submitted onto half term 1, algorithms and programming 1, but make sure you've got a screenshot of your extension in there before you submit. You should notice it's much, much faster to upload today. The technicians have done a fab job in fixing that bug.